Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning, it's Wednesday the 12th of November. I'm Caroline Hepker in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer seeks to head off the threat of a leadership challenge from one of his best-known cabinet ministers.
China's banks conjure phantom loans to hit quotas as a slowing economy saps real demand.
Plus, no visa, no problem. Wall Street ramps up hiring in India as Trump cracks down on foreign workers coming to the United States.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
In the UK, Bloomberg has learned that allies of Prime Minister Keir Starmer have sought to ward off a feared leadership challenge from one of the most high-profile members of his cabinet. The news comes after polling last month showed that support for Starmer's party had slumped to its lowest rating on record, with just 17% of Britons telling YouGov they'd vote for Labour if an election were held tomorrow. Bloomberg's Ewan Potts has more.
Just 2 weeks ahead of what's likely to be a contentious budget, and with Labour trailing Reform UK in opinion polls for more than 6 months now, feuds within the cabinet are spilling into the open. Bloomberg understands Keir Starmer supporters privately accuse Health Secretary Wes Streeting of plotting to replace the Prime Minister. A spokesperson for Streeting described the claims as categorically untrue. But another official said that Downing Street had gone into bunker mode and initiated what they called a circular firing squad. Starmer supporters argue any attempt to change leader would risk a market shock and undermine the government's finances. In London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Radio.
Economists have warned that weakness in the UK labour market is likely to have been overstated after official figures showed unemployment rose to 5% yesterday. Policymakers, including the Bank of England rate setter Megan Green, are concerned the numbers rely on erratic data from the Office for National Statistics. The jobs market is being monitored closely after the Chancellor was blamed for ramping up the burden on employers in her first budget. Neil Carberry, CEO of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, said payroll taxes should be left alone in the upcoming budget.
The Chancellor took a swinging swipe at national insurance last year, not just in increasing the rate, but in reducing the threshold, which is one of the reasons why we see so much pain coming from hospitality, retail sectors, where the threshold had a particular effect because wages on average tend to be lower. I think if there are to be tax rises, if they're for business, they have to come on profit, not on activity.
That was Neil Carberry, CEO of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, speaking to Bloomberg Radio, as traders reacting to the latest jobs data priced in a roughly 80% chance of a rate cut in December by the Bank of England.
Stocks and bonds have risen in tandem after softer US jobs data strengthened bets on a Federal Reserve rate cut at the next meeting. Numbers from ADP suggest the labour market slowed in the second half of October, prompting traders to raise bets on a December cut to around 70%. Private data, such as ADP's, has taken on greater importance as the US government shutdown deprives investors of official indicators. Here's the White House National Economic Director Kevin Hassett on CNBC.
There's been, quite a lot of disruption because of this terrible shutdown. And so, for example, I've been told that some of the surveys were never actually completed, so we'll never perhaps even know what happened in that month. And so we're going to be staring a little bit in cloudy weather for a while until we get the data agencies back up.
Kevin Hassett speaking there to CNBC as the broader artificial intelligence rally got another boost overnight. Chipmaker AMD is now forecasting average revenue growth of more than 35% over the next 3 to 5 years. The stock rallied in extended trading, with CEO Lisa Su saying she now expects the total AI chip market to reach $1 trillion by 2030.
Well, now to China, where a practice known as quick lend and recover is spreading as banks face rising pressure to hit steep targets. Bloomberg's Tiba Adebayo has more.
Chinese lenders are asking clients to take out loans and then immediately repay them, covering the interest. According to employees, these phantom loans are becoming more common as real demand struggles to keep up with government pressure. Bloomberg understands banks have been told to lend at least as much as last year and worry the number of borrowers could shrink even further. The news comes as policymakers face a major challenge as China's economy slows, encouraging people to borrow, spend and invest. Meanwhile, regulators have vowed to prevent funds circulating in the banking sector instead of flowing to the real economy. In London, Tiwa Adebayo, Bloomberg Radio.
The US military is looking at plans to build a temporary base capable of housing 10,000 personnel near the Gaza Strip. According to a request for information seen by Bloomberg, the Navy is looking at cost estimates from a list of contractors for a site, quote, near Gaza, Israel, that would provide 10,000 square feet of office space for a period of 12 months. Bloomberg understands that any potential base would be used to support an international stabilisation force to help secure the fragile truce between Israel and Hamas.
Eurogroup finance ministers gather in Brussels today to discuss fiscal developments in the currency bloc. It comes as French lawmakers are set to debate suspending the country's pension reform, a key demand by socialists, in order to help keep the Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu in power. French Minister for European Affairs Benjamin Haddad told Bloomberg Radio he's confident that Parliament will reach a budget compromise, but he said France must adapt to a new political reality.
The truth is now we're fitting a lot with the European norm. You know, for a long time in France, we used to have absolute majorities in parliament. And you'd have the majority adopt laws and the opposition being in the opposition. And most of our neighbors have fragmented parliaments, have coalitions, and they have a spirit and a culture of compromise, of reaching to one another.
French Minister for European Affairs Benjamin Haddad speaking there to Bloomberg Radio. Finance ministers of the wider European Union will meet tomorrow for a summit that could include a debate on the use of Russian assets to support Ukraine.
And those are your top stories on the markets. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index up by 0.4% this morning. The 10-year Treasury yield in the US down 3 basis points to 4.09% as US jobs data had showed that suffering and a ramping up of Federal Reserve rate cut bets. European stocks closed at a record high yesterday. The stock 600 was up by 1.3% at the close, and Italy's FTSE MIB finally passed its 2007 peak.
Well, in a moment, we're going to bring you more on the possibility, the potential leadership challenge facing Keir Starmer, plus how American investment banks are expanding in India in response to President Trump's moves to tighten visa rules in the US. But another story has caught our eye, as it often does at this time of the morning. 2025 apparently is turning out to be a great year for wine.
Well, it depends on where you are is the key part of this. So climate conditions led to excellent, or what winemakers are saying will be excellent production, exceptional indeed, some of the language being used in the likes of the Bordeaux region in France and Champagne as well. In England, it looks like it's going to be a great year for wine there too, Piedmont in Italy. But then disasters in other places, the Douro Valley in Portugal, that's going to be a terrible year for them. Corbière in France and the Languedoc region, they had suffered with forest fires in particular that had also led to damaging of a lot of grapes. Fears that some of the grapes there might actually end up with a smoky tint as a result of the fires in the area as well. But I suppose if we focus on the positive, it does look like 2025 is going to be one of those years ending in 5 that produces excellent wine. I didn't know this was a thing, but apparently it's a trend among winemakers.
Yes,
Bank on
absolutely.
2025.
We need to get ourselves educated about the best things to quaff of a weekend. But yes, I mean, there's also been a massive surge in demand for English wines, which I think is really interesting. But I think overhanging all of this is the question mark about demand for wine. Even if it's a fantastic year, consumption's actually been down. People are drinking less, particularly red wine, and we talked about that in the past. And then there's tariffs on the prices of a lot of these wines. But I think it's a really interesting piece. Yes, with highs and lows, I suppose, mirroring the worries about climate change, really, from Bloomberg's Ellen McCoy. She was reporting on the latest when it comes to wine. We're going to put a link to that story. If you're interested, maybe a buyer or a drinker, we'll put a link to it in our show notes. Now, let's bring you more on our exclusive reporting on the threat of a leadership challenge against the Prime Minister here in the UK. Our UK correspondent Lizzie Burden joins us now for more. Lizzie, good morning. Firstly, what do we actually know about about this challenge?
Well, our UK political editor Alex Wickham's been speaking to allies of the Prime Minister who've privately accused the Health Secretary Wes Streeting of plotting a leadership challenge. Now, it's not the first time that Streeting's name's been floated. He's younger than Starmer at 42. He's charismatic. He's from a council estate in London. He's gay. So he'd be seen as a fresh face of the party when Starmer's personal rating's been languishing behind Nigel Farage's, the Reform UK party leader. But Starmer's team say the market wouldn't like it. Remember when gilt sold off when the Chancellor cried, a taste of the potential reaction if she were sacked? Starmer will be hoping for the same loyalty from the bond vigilantes. And we should say, Streeting's team say that this is categorically untrue.
But Starmer has been struggling to keep his own MPs on board over the 16 months of his premiership. Is this more serious than previous rumblings we've heard?
Well, you'll remember the rumblings around Starmer's leadership, Stephen. They crescendoed around the Labour Party conference, but there was a sense that the Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham, stuck his head too far above the parapet, and then he had to backtrack, and it was seen as Starmer getting a bit of a grip on his party. The other name at the top of bookies' list is the former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, but Streeting himself has flirted with disloyalty before. He openly criticised President Donald Trump around his second state visit, so breaking with Starmer's softly approach. But what's interesting about Streeting is he only won his seat by 528 votes last July, and he could be vulnerable to a challenge by an independent candidate that's pro-Palestine. He might not even re-win his seat when there is an election.
But all of this coming only 2 weeks before the budget. How do you think the events behind the scenes affect what is seen to be a very painful set of announcements that come from the Chancellor?
Well, the Chancellor is expected to raise taxes, as we know, Caroline, and she's hinted that she could break Labour's manifesto pledge not to raise the three main levers of tax. The Times of London reporting that she's already asked the Office for Budget Responsibility, the fiscal watchdog, to do the sums on raising income tax, even if no final decision has been made yet. Now, that would be deeply unpopular, hence all the pitch rolling, but it would create an opportunity for a leadership challenge. Clearly, though, if Starmer goes so soon into his premiership, it would smack of that instability under the Conservatives. Johnson trusts Sunak that Starmer promised he would end.
OK, Lizzie, thank you so much for being with us. Our UK correspondent, Lizzie Burden. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this.
Now, a recruitment drive by US investment banks in India is expected to accelerate after moves by the White House to reduce immigration. That included pushing up the cost of the H-1B skilled worker visa to $100,000. The prospect of expansion by global banks abroad underscores the limits of Trump's strategy to safeguard domestic employment through tighter immigration controls. Our finance reporter Sudhi Naya joins us from Mumbai for more. Sudhi, great to talk to you. What has changed then for US banks in India as the Trump administration has been making these changes and tightening visa rules?
So financial services firms and banks that are headquartered in the US have a significant employee base in India. Just to give you some numbers, the top 6 US banks in India, including JP Morgan, Citi, Goldman Sachs, employ about 150,000 employees in India. That's a significant employee base, right? So when Trump announced the visa fee, a lot has changed for these players as well as the banks. So US firms are now walking a fine line as they look to add more of these sophisticated job roles in India. These firms are now looking inwards in India for hiring talent to ensure there is optimum, to ensure that there's cost optimization to save up on costs. So the banks that may have considered transferring a worker to the US may now opt to hire them in India to save their costs. That is going to lead to more jobs in India, ultimately feed into revenue generation and boost India's growth prospects.
Yes, that's very interesting, isn't it? Well, who is hiring? And you've talked a little bit about roles, but what sort of roles are the banks actually hiring for?
Sure. A little bit of background here. Initially, when the GCC operations started in India, these GCCs were viewed as call centers. In the late 1990s or early 2000s, if you had a grievance-related issue, say if you're somebody in the US and had some insurance-related grievances or issues, the chances were that they would be handled out of India. But that has significantly changed now. Indians are now expected to build the tech here, test the technology here. They're expected to do high-end, sophisticated roles, indulge in research and development, do most of the legal work, and ensure that the back-end processes run smoothly. So just to give you an example, what we found from our reporting is the Zelle app, which is a US-based digital payment service app for sending and receiving payments. The entire app was developed from India in their Indian GCCs of these Wall Street banks. So just this was to give you some light on how the job roles are changing. Now, coming to your question of what kind of roles banks are hiring for, these are mostly high-end, sophisticated tech and finance roles, mostly in the software, automation, testing, based for the tech side, and on the audit side, for the finance side, we have audits, we have business development roles, a certain amount of high-end roles that are being transferred to India.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.